Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today I'm going to talk to you about where rich people store their money to keep it safe. I'll talk about a couple dimensions, but there's an in particular distinction that a lot of people are not aware of surrounding a set of regulations and what that means for the safety of your money that is pretty relevant. And so you might be surprised to discover that this is a simpler solution than what a lot of people might think. A lot of people, I think, traditionally think, oh, you're going to put money in Cayman Islands bank accounts or something like this. It's quite different from that. And so today I'm going to explain, where do rich people store their money to keep it safe? Let's dive in right now. Before we do, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notification bell. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. You're what make this channel possible. You're, what helps us out. And so definitely, if this is valuable to you, please share it with your friends. Give it a thumbs up. Very much helps us. If you would like help specific to you, we build holistic, customized, tailored to you international solutions. This includes residencies, includes citizenships, includes global tax structures, trusts, asset protection, banking, all these fancy things to get you the best solution so that you keep the most of your money. And so, yeah, please reach out to us. Happy to help you optimize your finances as well as your lifestyle-wise, etc. So you can book a call with me at calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below, or send a message through offshorecitizen.net if you're interested in any of that. Okay, so where would you think, if you're imagining this, where do you think is that place where rich people are going to put their money to keep it safe? Now, I think a lot of people immediately, when they hear that, are going to say some country, and they're probably going to say someplace like Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore, maybe the US, maybe UK, etc. Now, it is definitely true that what you will see is capital tends to flow into certain countries in order to keep the money safe. So money doesn't tend to stay in, it's not flowing to China to stay safe, it's not flowing to India to stay safe, it's not flowing to Africa to stay safe. When people make money in those countries, they tend to move their money to places like Singapore, to places like Dubai, to places like London, to places like New York, San Francisco, the US, etc. And usually what they're looking for here is a place that their money can't be confiscated from them, because in a lot of countries, that is a risk, right? A lot of people don't seem to realize if you live in a Western country where you're not used to this reality, the Chinese government can just come and take your money. That's that. And if you think that you're big enough that you're not going to, take a look at Jack Ma. Pretty big, had a lot of problems. He was not the first, he will not be the last. So this is a very real problem for people in certain parts of the world. But I'm stepping a little bit beyond that. We're not just talking about the jurisdiction. We're not just talking about the country that money is flowing into. And by the way, what you're finding is, of course, it's more difficult to flow money into some of those places. And so hence places like UAE are getting a lot more capital than they used to, because whereas maybe London was the first choice, it's like, well, I can't get my money into London anymore, so I'm going to bring it to UAE, or I'm going to diversify it. So it's kind of a regional safe haven, which is a pretty valuable service to people all around the world. Now, the bigger thing is where they're storing it. Now, some people might think that I'm going to list a series of banks. They're going to say, oh, DBS, OCBC, UOB, Zurich Cantonal Bank, some of these banks that are rated like the safest banks in the world if you go and Google what is. But I'm not actually referring to that. What I'm referring to is something that people are a little bit not aware of, and this is to do with laws of brokerage custody compared to banks, okay? So actually, generally speaking, if I have a friend who manages wealth for billionaires, basically, and he would not keep money for a billionaire client, or he's quite wealthy himself, in a bank account. The reason is the state of the bank's finances is quite opaque. It is hard to tell whether the bank is solvent or not, how risky its assets are. This is not very clear. It's really difficult to get that information. And so, yeah, you have deposit insurance, but it's for a paltry amount, right? In some cases, 100,000, maybe 250,000, maybe $1 million in the cases that are the top. And so that's not going to go very far. Now, I've seen some people who open up dozens of bank accounts in order to spread their money out and take advantage of lots of different deposit insurance across accounts. And certainly you could try that. Realistically, the cost to set up and maintain the companies, to have the bank accounts, et cetera, is sort of an insurance cost. It'll cost you X percentage per year, and it's probably worth it if you would otherwise lose the money. But it's a lot of headache, not really the optimal way to go. So what actually happens is these people store their money in assets, and in particular through brokerage accounts. Okay, so let's just start by separating out a brokerage account versus a bank account. So when you have a bank account, you are exposed to the bank's loan portfolio risk, meaning that your deposits form part of what the bank can go and lend out. Okay. Now, yes, it's true, banks don't necessarily need deposits in order to lend. In certain environments, they can access money through the Federal Reserve or whatever the central bank is in their particular area. Not true in all banks in all places, but in some places. But generally, you have some sort of a loan portfolio, and that's the way that the bank is generating income. The problem with that is you're exposed to the risk of that loan portfolio. If it turns out that the bank does a bad job on their loans, as they did in 2008 or leading up to 2008, then if the bank goes defunct, it could hurt you. Now, to be fair, in places like the US, there's a broad system of bailouts. The Federal Reserve will print a lot of money and give it to the banks. If a bank goes under, other banks will buy them out and cover it. For example, what happened to Washington Mutual, where they were bought by JP Morgan Chase. So people actually losing money in places like the US is like extremely rare. Now, it's extremely rare until it's not. So, who knows how far in the future that will hold. Right now, it's pretty solid, but in the future, that could change. However, let's flip over into the brokerage side. So if you have a brokerage account, then there is, under the regulations of the brokerage, a clear segregation between the money of the brokerage and the client's money. And therefore, you're not exposed to their risk. Further, if you buy assets, for example, stocks and bonds, those actually are like titled to you. That's your asset. And so if something happens to the brokerage company, you can transfer it to a new brokerage company. It's listed with some sort of say like in the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ or something like that, right? Depending on the exchange that it's listed on. And so actually that is the more common way for people to store money. It is much safer for them to hold money in government bonds than it is to store money in bank accounts. Granted, yes, in the short run you can face bond fluctuation, but typically speaking, this is guaranteed to 100% the value of the bond. And if you're buying from something like a US federal bond, the chances of default are next to zero, right? As close. If they defaulted, you have to be worried about all kinds of other people defaulting. So it is as close to the risk-free rate essentially as you can get. You could have something like real estate assets. That certainly is one way of storing wealth, and a lot of people will do that. They will buy real estate assets as opposed to putting money into banks. And there's a variety of reasons with that. The problem, of course, is it's not liquid and it's not easy to transfer. So if you're in a situation where you're exposed to a country that has some turbulence, well, maybe not so great. So in general, where do people store their money? Yes, in a reputable brokerage account, right? It's probably in an institution that is well regulated, in a country that's well regulated, that's solid, et cetera. But they're doing it in a brokerage account, typically in specific assets. This would be some combination of bonds, commodities, stocks, and then in addition to that, to some extent, real estate. So I hope that helps. Hopefully gives you some idea of where to go. If all you're looking for is wealth preservation, that's certainly the way to go. Now, obviously we talk here about legal structures, and you can wrap it in some sort of a legal structure like a trust or a foundation to try and put added degrees of protection in there that, if it's done well, can work out well. But a lot of people kind of misunderstand that topic as well. So anyway, if you're interested in help with any of those things, please reach out to us. Happy to discuss it with you. Happy to figure out what your situation is and what the best solution is for you. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer, as I was mentioning before, or send a message through offshorecitizen.net. I will see you all on the next video.